Think about it for a second. Your entire bank, transferring money, checking your balance, all of it, now lives right in the palm of your hand. It's incredibly convenient, right? But with all that power comes a huge question. How is all of that actually kept safe? Well, today, we're pulling back the curtain on the official rulebook that turns your phone into a fortress. Let's get into it. You use your fingerprint to approve a payment, you see your bank's latest update pop up on social media. These things feel so simple, but they're sitting on top of this incredibly complex web of security regulations. So the real question is, what are those hidden rules that are working behind the scenes to turn your smartphone into a secure vault? Okay, so to get to the bottom of it, here's the game plan. We're going to start with the huge digital shift in banking itself. Then we'll dive into how your data is secured up in the cloud, look at the new rules for social media, and what happens with employee devices. And finally, we'll get into how your most personal data, your biometric identity, is protected. It really all comes down to finding that perfect balance between innovation and security. So why do we even need all these new rules in the first place? Well, it's because banking has been completely flipped on its head. We've gone from physical branches to digital apps in a flash, and the regulations have had to race to keep up with the tech. This isn't just some small update, it's a total rethinking of what security even means. First up, the cloud. When you hear the cloud, it kind of sounds like one big fluffy thing up in the sky. But for a bank, it's actually a set of very specific tools they can rent. And understanding these tools is the key to understanding how your data is managed. Let's break down the three main flavors. So the simplest model is what's called software as a service, or SaaS. Just think of it like your bank renting a ready-made application, maybe like an email system. They use the software, but the cloud company handles all the messy back-end stuff, the servers, the updates, you name it. Taking it one step up, we have platform as a service, or PaaS. Here, the bank gets a foundation, almost like a digital workshop where they can build their own custom applications. They control their apps, but the cloud provider is still the one managing the heavy machinery, the underlying hardware and operating system. And at the top level of control, you've got infrastructure as a service, or IaaS. This is like the bank renting the raw materials, the server space, the storage, the networking. They get maximum control to build whatever they want. But, and this is a big but, with that control comes the maximum amount of responsibility for keeping it all secure. Now this right here, this is the most important part. This single rule cuts through all that complexity we just talked about. It doesn't matter which service a bank uses, SaaS, PaaS, or IaaS, the rule is crystal clear. The bank, and only the bank, is ultimately responsible for your data's safety. They can't just pass the buck. The buck stops with them. And the rules get even more specific about where your data actually lives. The default setting is that it must stay in Taiwan. Now, if it does go overseas for some reason, that country's privacy laws have to be just as tough. But here's the crucial part. A backup of your most important data must always remain physically inside Taiwan. That's a really powerful safety net. Okay, let's switch gears. We're moving from the bank's internal data centers to a much more public space, social media. Banks are everywhere online now, but it is not a free-for-all. They have to follow these really strict procedures for how they talk to people and, more importantly, how they react when things go wrong. And this just shows you how buttoned up their process is. If there's an improper post, let's say an employee accidentally leaks a customer's name, or a marketing tweet has misleading info, there's no panic. There's a plan. They have to identify it, follow a script, and, this is critical, save everything. Every record is preserved for investigation. It's all about accountability. All right, let's pivot again from the bank's public face to its internal operations. A lot of employees now use their own personal phones or laptops for work. This whole trend is called Bring Your Own Device, or BYOD, and it is a huge challenge. I mean, think about it. A single lost personal phone could potentially become a major security breach. So before a personal device can even dream of touching the bank's network, it has to pass a pretty tough inspection. It absolutely cannot be modified or jailbroken, which just means its built-in security features can't be bypassed. It's got to have antivirus software and all the latest security patches. And, importantly, the bank has to get the employee's permission to enforce these security controls on their personal phone or laptop. So what happens if that device gets lost or stolen? Well, once again, there's a clear time-sensitive procedure. The employee has to report it immediately, and the bank's security team springs into action. They can remotely lock the device, Or, if it's really serious, they can wipe all bank-related data from it instantly, cutting off any potential breach right then and there. This next topic is probably the most personal one of all, biometrics. Using your face, your fingerprint, or even your voice to get into your bank account feels incredibly futuristic. But your biometric data isn't just a password you can change if it gets stolen. It's literally you. And that means it needs a whole different level of protection.
You see, banks have to manage this constant balancing act between two key risks. On one hand, you have the false acceptance rate. That's the nightmare scenario. Someone else's face gets accepted as yours, a huge security risk. On the other hand, you have the false rejection rate. That's when you, the actual owner, get locked out. Super annoying. So the goal is to get both of these as low as possible. Make it secure without making it impossible to use.
So how do they protect the data itself? Well, they use multiple layers of security. Your raw biometric scan, your actual fingerprint, is encrypted. The template that's used to match it is also encrypted. Then, these two encrypted files are stored on totally separate systems. It's like putting your valuables in two different safes, and each one has its own unique key. And what about the keys to those safes? They are stored in something called a hardware security module. This device is certified to a US government military-grade standard. And what this standard basically guarantees is that the encryption keys can never be copied or removed from that piece of hardware. They are physically trapped inside, which makes them incredibly difficult to steal. So after going through the cloud, social media, personal devices, and biometrics, what's the big picture here? Well, it all comes down to a fundamental balance. How do you embrace these powerful new technologies while building an even more powerful shield of security around them? And those four pillars we just covered, the cloud, social media, BYOD, and biometrics, they are the absolute foundation of your bank's entire digital defense strategy. Ultimately, every single one of these rules is designed to do one thing: maintain your trust. The whole goal is to create a system where every new convenience, every new feature that makes your life easier, is matched by an equal or even greater improvement in safety and security. And that leaves us with a really fascinating question for the future. We've got the rulebook for today's technology, but things like artificial intelligence and quantum computing are right around the corner. What new risks are they going to bring? And what will the next generation of rules even look like to keep us all safe?